Holding angles properly in Valorant is one of the most overlooked aspects of the game. Today, we'll cover the theory behind angle holding and put this theory into practice by analysing real in-game positions. No matter what angle we're holding, we want to hold it from the position that is most advantageous to us. And in general, we can increase the value of a position by focusing on 7 key principles. So, let's kick off with the first one. A good position is one that optimizes angle advantage. How many times have you heard the phrase, "They weren't even on my screen when they killed me"? It seems to happen quite frequently, and while the Valorant servers are often the first scapegoat, players don't seem to realise that the problem is often something completely different, namely, angle advantage. Take a look at this scenario on Bind, where Raze is holding this angle in showers. Can you spot what's wrong with this? Well, as we explained in our video on peeking, Raze is standing too close to the wall. Whether she realises or not, the attacker will be able to see her shoulders poking out before she sees them. Here's why. If we draw straight lines from each player's point of view, coming from the middle of their heads, we can see that Skye has the angle advantage here. Skye can see Raze, but Raze cannot see Skye. To remedy the situation, Raze should take a few steps back and neutralise Skye's angle advantage. If you're at least as far from the wall as your opponent, their angle advantage is nullified. And if you can hold an angle where you're the one furthest back, then you'll be the one who sees them first. So, the next time you're holding an angle close to a wall, just keep angle advantage in mind. And if possible, turn it into your advantage. Remember though, that standing too far back might expose you to more angles as well, which brings us to rule 2. A good position is one that isolates the fewest angles possible. How many times have you spectated someone and see that they're trying to hold 2 or even 3 angles at the same time? Not only is there attention divided between the angles, but they're also exposing themselves to getting shot from multiple angles. Remember that a good angle accomplishes 2 things. It makes the enemy easy to hit, but also makes you more difficult to hit by putting cover between you and the enemy. Take this case on Haven for example. An inexperienced player like Henry might try to hold both entries into sight by moving their crosshair between each angle. His eyes drift back and forth and his concentration is divided, probably causing him to whiff if an enemy peeks. Not only this, but Henry is also completely unaware of the angles he's exposed to. Henry could instead isolate a single angle and focus his concentration on it. If needed, he can then periodically peek the other angle for information and remain much safer in the process. If you are determined to watch more than one angle at the same time for whatever reason though, you should preferably try to merge the 2 angles into one. For example, if you position yourself in this corner, both routes into sight are covered by a single straight line. You're holding one angle that covers 2 entry points. Keep in mind however, that fewer exposed angles doesn't automatically mean better. Instead, the angles must also be valuable. So, rule 3 is, a good position holds angles of value. Being on the other side of the map while your teammates are executing on sight isn't exactly a valuable angle. You need to hold angles that actually have an impact on the round. Think sight control, enemy rotations, choke points, and flank cover. On top of this, you need to consider angles not just for yourself, but for your teammates' positions as well. For example, look at this scenario on A-Site Icebox. Henry's team are in a post-plant scenario, and his teammate Jett is holding the spike with her operator. Henry's job is to watch for a flank from T-spawn. He takes this position with a soft angle, not wanting to expose himself too much. It feels intuitive, but it's wrong. Here's why. By holding this angle soft, Henry's giving up all of this important map control. Henry simply isn't watching it. The enemy has free reign to walk across and take a shot at Jett from behind. Jett, assuming Henry to be watching their flank, isn't expecting this, and they lose the round. Instead, Henry should have told Jett about this, or ideally, that holding the angle more aggressively. He should have held a hard angle. This might expose Henry more, but he's now holding vital map control unlike earlier. Here's another example on B-Side Bind. When Jett, who's playing Heaven, asks Henry to hold showers, Henry has 2 options. He can hold showers hard, exposing himself a bit more, or he can hold it soft, ensuring a quote-unquote safer angle for himself, but giving up some potentially important map control. Doing this restricts the space Jett has to play on Heaven, and worst case scenario could outright cause her death. To be clear, we're not saying that one hold is inherently better than the other. There are trade-offs of both, and there will be scenarios where holding soft is the right call. So remember, we need to make sure that our angles hold important map control. We'll cover what this means and how to decide whether certain map control is important or not in our video about map control. Subscribe so you don't miss that. Now, onto rule number 4. A good position is costly or difficult to clear. Making the enemy's life as hard as possible is one of the core goals of holding an angle. If you force your opponent to use vital utility, allocate multiple players, and waste precious time to clear your angle, you've done your job. This becomes more and more true the later you are into the round. Valorant is a game where you're in constant competition with the enemy to deplete each other's resources and gain an edge. And there's a few things we can do to make our position more costly to clear. First off, realize that you don't have to commit to a gunfight. Let's say you're holding A main from pillar on fracture. After peeking and taking a few shots, you have a couple of options. You can re-peek the enemy, hoping to get a kill or two, or you can stay put and force the enemy to make a move, because they will need to clear you in order to plant. If Chamber doesn't re-peek them, they can't kill him. By simply making yourself known and then hiding, you've already put the enemy in a defensive stance. They don't know if you're going to re-peek or not, so they can either wait and pray for you to re-peek, wasting time, use up their precious utility to force you off the angle, or bulk up their manpower to clear you out manually. The power of not doing anything is underutilized in Valorant. The enemy is now forced to fully commit to the push if they want to clear you out. If you don't re-peek, there's literally no other way to clear you except pushing you. The second tip is, don't be static when holding an angle. Have you noticed how pros rarely hold an angle standing completely still? There's a reason for that. As we mentioned in our peeking video, more often than not, the peeker has the advantage in a gunfight. Faster reaction times, ping advantage, good timing, and even concentration lapses all contribute to the peeker's advantage. That being said, we can turn our static angle into a peek. It's really as simple as it sounds, just peek the angle you need to hold and get back behind cover. Do this every second or so and you're fully utilizing peeker's advantage as the defender. In some positions, however, peeking unpeeking may not be possible. Still, in these cases, we can move side to side and make the enemy's life a lot more difficult if they peek. Remember though, when you step, don't make a sound or you'll be giving away your element of surprise. If you need to, practice this for a couple minutes each day until you get the hang of it. Utilizing headshot angles is another valuable tool you have to make your angle more difficult to clear out. Think about it, with a headshot angle, you're only exposing a tiny part of your body, making their shots much harder. You might have heard the term standard angle before. Usually, this refers to angles that are both hard to clear and hold valuable map control. The downside to standard angles, however, is predictability. When a position is crowned as a standard angle, chances are that even your grandmother knows about it. Therefore, competent opponents will always use their resources to clear these predictable angles, or will simply be aiming right at your head. It might therefore be a good idea to change up these standard angles in subtle ways to remedy this. Which brings us to Rule 5. A good position is unpredictable. Now, I'm sure we've all played against a Henry before. Someone who for some reason is determined to hold the same angle round after round no matter how many times it fails. It goes without saying, but don't be a Henry. Information is one of the most valuable resources you have in Valorant, and playing the most predictable angle every single round only serves to help your opponents. Depriving the enemy of reliable information is mandatory if you want to win, so make sure you're unseen, silent, and a constant puzzle throughout the game. Now, we'd love to give you a universal checklist for being unpredictable, but that kind of defeats the purpose. If everybody followed this checklist, then it would once again become predictable. Therefore, as annoying as it sounds, you need to come up with this checklist yourself. What feels predictable for a gold player won't translate into Ascendant or Immortal lobbies, so you need to analyze what works and what doesn't, and over time you'll gain an intuition for predictability that's unique to you and your rank. At the end of the day, the best tip we can give you is use your brain. Switch up positions depending on the enemy you're facing, and always keep them guessing. Think about what positions you're going to take, rather than habitually taking the same positions because I always play there. And don't be afraid to hold an angle that feels instinctive. Sometimes, the most unpredictable things you can do in-game will surprise you too. After all, just as I'm sure Sun Tzu used to say, to confuse the enemy, you must first confuse yourself, or something. Now, onto off angles. Off angles, though more risky in nature than standard angles, are designed to catch your opponent off guard. You hold an angle that is slightly off a standard angle, hence off angle. And whilst the opponent expects you to be in one or two logical spots, you catch them off guard by being somewhere else. The later into the round you utilize off angles while the enemy is under time pressure, the better. Since they'll have less time to clear every single angle, this is where off angles shine. Another angle to keep in mind is what's known as a one and done spot. These are angles that are completely and utterly dangerous to hold in normal scenarios. They have no fallback plan and almost guarantee that even if you get a kill, that you'll be traded. The most logical scenario to use them therefore is during 1v1 or 1v2 situations, ideally with time pressure for the enemy. We'll be going into detail on standard angles and off angles in our dedicated video soon, so look forward to that. Whichever angle you end up using though, always keep Principle 6 in mind. A good position has a plan behind it. In the pursuit of unpredictability, we can sometimes fall into the trap of overextending ourselves. We might overcommit with an overly aggressive angle to catch the enemy off guard, but have no actual fallback plan. To avoid scenarios like this, it's crucial to plan ahead and make sure that you have some idea of what's to come and how you'll react. Think ahead and plan. This is why Jet and Chamber are fantastic agents for aggressive off angles. They can overcommit almost infinitely, and at the click of a button can always fall back. If you aren't playing agents like these, however, there's a bit more we need to focus on. First, expect enemy utility use. You'll never play a game of Valorant where zero utility is used, so why does it catch us off guard so often? Think mollies, smokes, and if the enemy lineup has a Phoenix, Breach, Skye or any kind of stun agent, expect to be flash and prepare to 180. Additionally, what does the enemy lineup look like? Is there a specific agent who can neutralize your position with ease? Expect and plan for a fallback. Also, think back to previous rounds. Is there a pattern you can spot in the enemy movements? And what's your crosshair placement looking like? If you're about to get peeked, is it better to have your crosshair directly along the nearest wall? Or would it be better to expect a wide swing and have your crosshair slightly further out? And then there's what we call the 30-degree rule. Simply put, it's the idea that based on your crosshair placement, there's a good chance that enemies that fall outside your 30-degree cone of vision have the advantage over you in a gunfight. With that said, you should look for positions that force the enemy to fall within your cone while you don't fall into theirs. Yes, aim and sick flicks are hugely important skills in Valorant, but putting yourself in a position where you have the split-second advantage and you don't have to rely on your flicks is just smart gameplay. And with all that, let's move on to the final principle of holding angles. Rule 7. A good position plays around your team. Even though we've covered tips on how to improve your angle so far, it's just as important to consider the team aspect too. A well-rounded Valorant player doesn't just play for themselves, they understand how their positional changes affect their teammates. The most important tools here are crossfires and playing contact. If two of you are holding an angle, why give the enemy two individual 1v1s? Why not make the enemy's job 100 times harder by holding a crossfire instead? Whenever you're in a 2vx situation with a teammate, always be aware that doubling your firepower is a great way to guarantee rounds. Alternatively, you can play off each other's contact too. Position yourselves in a way where you can quickly back each other up if one of you gets into contact with the enemy. Mindful positioning is a crucial factor here. So be mindful of the spacing between you and your teammates, how your fallback from one position affects other players, whether you need to communicate a position change, and so on. Next time you choose an angle, evaluate that position. Ask yourself questions like, how easily can I fall back from this position? Does this angle cover valuable map control? Should I be holding this angle hard or soft? How predictable is this position? How much does it cost to clear me, utility and time-wise? Is this position helping my team in the macro picture? Evaluating your positions like this will ingrain positive playstyles throughout your career. If you've learned something from this video, check out our guide on peeking next. See you next time.